Hey everyone, welcome back to another Song Battle Report. In this game, my Greyjoys faced off against Maygarkhan's double dragon Targaryens. This is one of our first games post-patch where we both were trying out some new things. The big one for Targs, obviously, is dragons are now 7 points, and Hrakar's got the same outflank buff as everybody else. For Greyjoys, the only new unit in my list is the Blacktyde Chosen, which now have Embolden, which is a pretty big deal for Greyjoys considering our other morale booster was just too shiny to not get nerfed. Let's get into today's game. Today we are playing Game of Thrones, which is probably the most standard mission in the book. I feel mostly okay about this because my army is very, very good at playing objectives. As you're about to see though, my opponent's list is very, very mobile, and could potentially make my life very difficult if he plays it well and uses retreats and speed to his advantage. I still don't feel too bad about this because I'm playing so far up on activation. Looking at my opponent's list, he's running a lot of units I know he really likes. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it. He's got Drogo and Blood Riders. I still think Blood Riders are bad. I know they can't be weakened now, but the fact that they lost, they got the same Warcry nerf as everybody else, right? And that was their primary purpose, to put out those 2 tokens so another unit like Vets or Flayed Men can make use of them. I just don't think they do enough for 8 points personally. The rest of his list, he's pretty light on wounds and activations. He's got Drogon, he's got Rhaegal, trying out the 2 new 7-point dragons, and he's got a Hraakar. These are all good units. The list is so squishy, it's not survivable at all. And he has so few activations on the table when I feel like these units want to be backed up by activations. You see the same thing in his NCUs. He's got Dany Unburnt, Tycho, and Quaithe. Tycho, I feel, is almost necessary when running dragons, especially when you've got so few wounds on the table. Quaithe really benefits from a higher activation list, and so does Dany Unburnt, so you can chain together those dragon attacks a little bit easier. So if I was playing Targs, I would just be worried about putting something that's so vulnerable on. Next up, I'm playing my Greyjoys, sticking with the Salt King. I've got Balon Greyjoy as my commander in this list in a unit of Blacktyde Chosen. I'm a big fan of this unit after the patch. I think they put in a lot of work. They feel about right for a 7-point unit. They're roughly sworn brothers that instead of Sundering get Dauntless and Embolden, which probably is more valuable in a Greyjoy force. This list, you'll see me running some variations of it, but it's no pillage pretty much whatsoever. I've got 3 units of Ironborn Bowmen, which are like the premier unit Greyjoys have. It's kind of the reason to play the faction, having 4-point archers that can make use of these higher activation lists and start exploiting flanks. Then I've got 2 units of Drowned Men, which again, I think are almost necessary post-patch. They really pull their weight into a lot of matchups. For NCUs, I've got Wendemir, Peter Baelish, and my morale is good enough in this list that I decided to include Baron Blacktyde. Terrain was placed pretty evenly across the middle for this match. My opponent placed the corpse pile on the far left and the low wall on the far right. I placed the weirwood tree to really make use of that combination of Embolden and acceptable sacrifices, which is the reason to play the gentleman in the Balon list. I forgot to mention that earlier. And I placed a palisade in the middle of the board. Obviously, Targs or dragons can move around a palisade easier than everybody else, but I want to make them have to do it. As for deployment, I placed myself fairly evenly across the table. Mygar would need to pick a side and move on to that if he wanted to win. Splitting up a Targ force can be a death sentence, especially when they have so few wounds on the table. Taking this into account, plus Wendy helps me slide wherever I want, I wasn't too worried about not having shots to take. Going first, my opponent took the first turn in the first round, so he could bring his Hraakar on in turn 2. If you're outflanking units, I think this is generally where you want to be. To start things off, my opponent put Tycho on the letters and chose to weaken my Blacktyde Chosen. I didn't care about this for a couple of reasons. The first being this list puts out most of its damage by getting flank shots with bows. Weakening my Blacktyde Chosen is something I can live with. Also, I had Bless in my hand, so I'd be able to remove it before they do something meaningful anyway. I actually decided to play Beron on the horse at this point to maneuver up the rightmost bows. Mygar then plays Quaithe to the bags to block it. At this point, swords are open, and I have We Do Not Sow in my hand, so no matter what, someone is getting shot this turn. Drowned Men are about as useful for passing as NCUs are, so I march the Drowned Men up by the bows on the right, kind of playing into what I want. My opponent then moves his dragons up onto the rightmost objective. With a Wendy shift at this point, I'm able to pull myself into range and have the Drowned Men hand out rerolls. At this point, I play Peter to the swords and get 4 hits with my bows. Here's where I really wish I had Roderick in my list to dig for Finger Dance. I'll talk more about lists later, but I'm thinking I have one list maybe without Baelish just to include Roderick. However, my bows still do 3 wounds to the dragon. I think a lot of people forget that Greyjoys have an Assault Order Light in the deck. Rather than block the crown, Maygarkhan brings up his other dragon to threaten my bows. So at this point, I then take the crown and shoot again. This time, I only do 2 hits and the dragon saves them both. So no miraculous turn 1 bow kill today. Now, Drogo comes up to the middle of the board. Drogo in 6-inch cav, the one good thing is he can kind of threaten whatever he wants when he's in the middle. Even though he winds up facing left, I fully expect him to deal with what's happening on the right side of the board with my bows. I just, he's a good player. He doesn't want to give my bowmen unnecessary flank shots. Now I activate my bows, shooting Drogon again, landing 4 more hits and doing 2 more wounds. Even though my opponent doesn't have a turn, he still has a start of turn, so he's able to pass a Warcry with Drogo, handing out a panic token to the bows. He's also able to pop the Tycho heal to heal 5 to the dragon. Obviously, I don't love the fact that everything I've done is gone, but Tycho is now burnt, so I feel pretty good about getting that out of the way in the first round. At this point, I'm able to kind of swing up the rest of my army, doing this thing where as they move up, I pivot to face the right side of the board, because that's where everything's happening. So as my opponent's moving to deal with that, I'll be able to start exploiting flank shots. Going into round 2, at the top of the round, the Hraakar comes in on my right flank to threaten my bows. I have a couple of options here, but I just decide to stick with the plan and force the bows to have to be dealt with. I have the Drowned Men hand out rerolls, and then I shoot and fire on the dragon. I get all 6 hits this time and do 3 wounds. At this point, Maygarkhan comes in with the Hraakar rear charge and takes off a rank, plus 1 more wound. I still feel pretty okay, but need to take some action being the swords is open. I actually don't take swords here. Instead, I play Beron to the letters and weaken the Hraakar. I think this is okay as far as options go. Beron needed to come down. I didn't have any fantastic shots, and I don't have a Finger Dance at this point, and more cards are always more better. I don't think I had any easy choices here, but I think this one was fine. At this point, my Drowned Men get charged by Rhaegal. He hits, but only rolls a 1 on the D3, so he fails to kill them. I then activate the Drowned Men. I heal them with Bless with Stone, which feels really, really good. I then retreat them and just stay on the objective, pivoting a bit so they can't get charged again. At this point, my opponent activates with Drogo. He plays Unstoppable Advance, and just like the Kool-Aid Man, runs right through the palisade into the front of my bows. Through Beron, I only take 3 more wounds, 1 from Expert Duelist and 2 from a failed panic check. I actually managed to block all the hits here. I'm then able to shoot up my bows on the left and shoot into Drogo's flank with swords, doing 2 more wounds. Drogon then charges into my bows, but doesn't roll high enough on the D3, so they hang in there for a little bit longer with 1 brave bowman left. The Blacktyde Chosen are still unactivated, so I charge into Drogo, playing Kraken's Wrath. I get 2 wounds through with precision and 2 more from failed saves. He obviously passes his panic, it's called Drogo. Dany then activates to give the dragon a free attack to finish off my bows. Sure enough, Drogon mans up and is able to finish off the bows on 1 wound. My bows on the right then activate and shoot... my bows on the left then activate and shoot Drogo in the flank again, getting all 6 hits. They do some serious work here with actually a failed panic check, and I take Drogo down to 1 wound left. At this point, my Drowned Men do what they're made to do. They move up to block the butts of the bows, and Tycho lets Drogo retreat off horses, allowing me to pivot the Blacktyde Chosen. He does play Field Control to weaken them, which actually, in retrospect, I don't think I should have been able to pivot off of Field Control. I forget what the positive side does, but I think we both missed it. It'll be up on the screen. My other bows stay skill to score the point, giving me 2 victory points at the end of the round. Round 3, with Maygarkhan going first, he decides to heal Drogo with bags. Being I still don't have Finger Dance, I don't take swords. Instead, I charge the dragon while I have a chance to. Even with the weakened token, I'm still able to take Drogon down to 2 wounds remaining. Quaithe then takes swords, and the dragon takes a rank off the Blacktyde Chosen. I then play Beron to horses to block it and replace it with the We Do Not Sow, healing up because my opponent controls bags and finishing the dragon. I'm going to say it every time that this happens to me, but healing off of a We Do Not Sow is just simply one of the best feelings, in my opinion, as a Greyjoy player. When your cards do things, the deck actually feels like it's supposed to. The slight tangent here, but the most frustrating thing about Greyjoys is you can see what they were trying to get out of them, like the hit and run force, which then regroups. But it just doesn't usually work that way on the table because those situations don't come up a ton in competitive play. So, sorry for that small side tangent. Here, I actually wind up putting Beron on the Blacktyde Chosen and pivot to face Drogo. I am less worried about a charge from a weakened Hraakar than I am from rear charge from Drogo. Rhaegal at this point is then able to charge into the Drowned Men, killing them, but good old-fashioned Greyjoy science brings them back with a what is dead. Being I don't want to just give up the Drowned Men, I retreat them. I probably could have realigned and swung, but I didn't see much of a point with that. Start a turn, I used Baelish's ability so they wouldn't just die when I did that. The Hraakar then has to come in to finish off the Drowned Men with a rear charge. I then flip with Baelish. Dany plays Stiletters to weaken my bows and draw 2. Finally, I just place Windermere on the crown to get an order token. At this point, Drogo is kind of threatened by 2 bowmen, and he decides he doesn't want to have to deal with that. He moves himself onto the rear objective. After this, I get to play the game by myself because I started off with a 9 activation list, and my opponent and I'm down 2 activations, my opponent's down 1, so I'm still keeping up that parity. I then march my weakened bows onto the middle objective so I could threaten either Drogo or the dragon going into the next round. I, at this point, do have a finger dance, finally, so I play it on my bows, and I march my Drowned Men around to the rear of the Blacktyde Chosen to support them should they need it. Going into round 4, at this point, I'm going first, I feel pretty good, and I draw both Price of Failures. And being I'm going first with the swords open, I feel pretty good about my chances about this round. At the top of the round, the first turn, I use a Wendy shift to pull my bows over. Windermere shifts are fantastic for this. When your opponent thinks they're out of range, all of a sudden, they pull you back in. So I pull them over so they get in range of the dragon. My opponent does use a Quith token to make it so Peter can't activate. So I just decide to put Beron onto swords and shoot the dragon. I wind up doing 5 wounds with the finger dance and the Price of Failure. Maegor then plays Tycho to the bags to heal off 3 wounds to Drogo. At this point, I feel like I need to go for it. I activate with my bows and fire again, and sure enough, with the finger dance, I finish off Rhaegal. I can see an argument here that I should have gone for Drogo. However, having the rear shots and the dragon being so vulnerable, I felt like it was the right target. Dragons also go right through Beron, so that was a consideration, but maybe not a very good one. I think probably the better argument for going for the dragon is being they're so mobile and just they do so many things that Greyjoys can't play into, like be that mobile. We can shift around with Windermere, sure. We've got things like Victarion and Euron to help us move around in other ways. This list doesn't really have any of that, and it doesn't have any cav, so having that dragon get behind the Blacktyde Chosen in an angle where they wouldn't be able to see it again, I felt would have been a bigger issue than having Drogo in my front arcs. My opponent at this point moves his Hraakar up with horses, so he isn't giving an easy charge target to my Drowned Men. I'm able to play Baelish to the crown using letters, weakening the Hraakar again. I did this so a crown zap wasn't just going to nuke my bows in the middle objective and just have them instantly blow up from all the self-inflicted damage they've done to themselves with Price of Failure. Drogo, obviously at this point, I feel like he really has one play. He activates, charges into my bows, and absolutely annihilates them. Instead of surging towards my army, he surges in the opposite direction. I then play Wendy to the letters to get another token. I now have 2 Wendy tokens, so I'm feeling pretty good. At the start of my next turn, I use the Wendy token to begin slingshotting my Blacktyde Chosen. I then activate my Drowned Men, moving them towards the middle of the board. I then use another token and attempt a 2-up charge with the Blacktyde Chosen. The rule with this game is if you're going to take a 2-up charge, you're going to fail it and you're going to roll a 1. That's exactly what I did. However, I wasn't too devastated by this. The fact of the matter is, with the failed charge, they're still in the middle of the board, they're still in the middle of objective, and they're threatening a charge next round. So I could live with that. Opening of round 5, I'm ahead 8-3. We talk about the game for a bit. Unfortunately, my opponent just can't really come back from this. I'm going to get to 10 points before he's able to do anything substantial. He charges Drogo into my bows to go for the kill. He does 7 wounds. Again, Blood Riders are still incapable of one-shotting a Greyjoy unit when they're at full health, so I wasn't too worried about this at all. I then play Beron to the bags, influencing the Bowmen. He attacks again, but doesn't do anything substantial through Beron. At this point, we call it because it's unstoppable. It's impossible, especially with this play, for me to get to 10 VPs before it's a crushing defeat. Sorry for the fast game today, guys. The whole thing kind of played itself out, but I think it was a worthwhile game altogether. I was sick, so I wanted to film a shorter game. I do have a longer one coming out soon where I actually played Martells. Overall, thoughts on the patch and the current state of the meta, especially from a Greyjoy perspective. I do think Targaryens will be one of the harder matchups for Greyjoys, just because of their mobility. It's not as bad as the Free Folk Night's Watch matchup, which are probably the 2 most busted things in the game this week, in general, especially seeing the results from Adepticon. Kev Bows, which is just a better shooting list than we are, or the Barra Super Panic Bomb, but it's still pretty bad. The one shot I feel we have is probably bringing neutral units or bringing a higher activation list. The other option is to hope we can tank and heal it off, which is not a particularly appealing strategy when Dothraki Vets, which I think are still a really good unit, can one-shot us. I do have to say, with this list, I have really enjoyed playing Double Drown Men. I tried out an 8 activation version, actually, with Double Drown Men at the local club, and I found the sheer amount of healing onto a unit like Ironmakers was very, very nice, so I will be experimenting with that some more. I will probably not be playing this exact list anymore outside of events that I'm already registered in with it. It was a good experiment. It definitely showed me what Greyjoys were up to right now. I might come back to it, but I do feel like there's something missing. I think playing down 2 cards in my Roost list is okay, but playing down 4 cards, especially when those cards aren't like the worst cards in the world, is just too many. I understand the argument. I played a lot of Magic, running bad cards in a deck to make the idea behind the deck function better is not a competitive choice. But at the same time, with Song, I just feel like you can't be giving up that many cards when you only have 20. I'm running a similar list with Euron Commander and the additions of Cunning Ploy and So Discord, plus the occasional mind game shenanigans has been worth the loss in morale. The Lysini Pirates have also been really good in the 9-act Euron list, which is really exciting for me because between them and Asha Trappers, Pillage almost feels worthwhile. Euron is also the reason I got into Greyjoys. I love his cards. I think they're a ton of fun. I think So Discord is a really cool order, so expect to see that list on the channel. I'm actually taking it to a tournament this weekend. Targs feel like they're in a really weird place. They're not bad, but the faction is just kind of a mess of units with no real faction identity. I understand that Drogo is the big daddy of the faction, but if I was a more regular Targaryen player than I am right now, I would probably look at something like Marceline or Queen of Marine as well, because I feel like there is something there. I'm trying to run a different faction at every local event when we start up tournaments again, so I might run them at a local tourney. I think Maygar's list was just too squishy. Having 30 soft wounds on the table just isn't particularly good. I do think Hraakars and Dragons are really, really great, but they want activations. Thank you all so much for watching. It's crazy to me how much the channel has grown in the past couple of weeks. If you like this video, please go ahead and like it. It helps out a lot. And subscribe because there are more videos coming along with some really awesome news that I can't wait to share with you all. Let me know down below what you're running and what you're excited about now that we're about a month into Season 3. Until I see you all again, don't forget to have fun and roll